This is Chi. She's been here for 8 times. We have just discussed how many times, when did we meet each other. And we have also talked about the Chinese New Year, which has passed, I think, in beginning of February. Or
yes.
It was. Yeah. We'll talk about it a little bit later. And we are now in the year of the
Monkey.
Yes. This is very important when you have business with Chinese businessmen, also to know this. What does it mean to have this pig's year, or dragon's year, or rat's year, or anything like that? So she is going to talk about how to be a Chinese in Denmark. She's been here for almost 10 years. She's an engineer from DTU. And I know she will talk about the first impression of coming to Denmark, going by bus in Copenhagen and so on. And her family is living close to Shanghai.
I think every time I use it, when I'm using the
Do you have some
HDMI, the volume, I think
okay.
somehow.
And she's working at Katrine there. Has been there for many years. And I met her through an organization which is called Expats in Denmark. Which means expat means people coming from another country working in, for instance, Denmark. So if I would go to China, I would be an expat in China. And in that connection, I saw that she is talking about how to be in Denmark, and I think I would like to let you know the same thing. It's very interesting, and you were talking about politics, climate, art, etc., lots of things. And I give the word to you.
Yeah, thank you. Just to find my point. Okay, before I start, so hello everyone. So Jenna has already introduced me, so I will not spend time on that. Let me see if you can hear the volume. Could you hear? It's not so loud.
Have you tried setting your output device as standard for HDMI?
Yes, I think I haven't set up. I think I think somewhere should set up, I think. The default.
Playback device.
Yeah, I would click a playback.
Then that one, and then set as default.
Yeah.
And maybe Niels needs to press on.
I think this.
Let's try that first.
I think probably this is. Oh, it's not. Yeah. Okay, I pressed it just now. I did not press enough, so maybe it's better.
Tripled to more than 30 million people. It's the fastest growing city on the planet. Everywhere I travel in China, this is what I see. Miles and miles of newly constructed apartment blocks, vast new roads and bridges, new everything. And yet the more I look at China, the less comprehensible it seems to be. Is all this the achievement of capitalism or of communism? Of the Western free market, or of traditional Chinese values?
As I was just explaining to my friend here, the way the Chinese think is as different from the way we think as the way they write. And that's why I almost feel a little bit like an alien from another planet. When I come here, all the basic assumptions that I've grown up with, particularly about individual freedom, just don't apply here. It's a little bit as if I'd grown up on the moon and was used to leaping around effortlessly, and then suddenly found myself on Earth, weighed down by gravity.
Yeah, so this is some...
Individual freedom seems to count for less here than
Okay, so this is just a quick start. I wanted, because he said that all the assumptions he grew up with, that suddenly when he came to China, it's become not valid anymore. So he felt himself that growing up in the moon and now coming to the earth when he arrived in China. So this is just to indicate that many of the assumptions that you might grow up with may not be valid anymore when you travel to China, when you also maybe work with Chinese people. Okay, so today I will talk about Chinese in Denmark. Basically, I wanted to compare the Danish mentality, what I have observed, and also Chinese mentality, also the Chinese people, different way of thinking and different way of behaving. And so for me, it's very important that it's not only look at the phenomena, that why people behave this and that, but it's also important to think about it. What are the root causes that cause people behave like that or think like that? And what are the reasons? If we know the reasons, then of course we can cope it better. When we see the differences, for example, if they behave and think differently, then we can say, oh, how can we, find a solution, to find the common languages. So before I start to talk about the differences, I wanted to talk about some basic facts difference between Denmark and China. So regarding the population, yeah, China has a huge population, but Denmark is about 5.6 million and China about 13 billion. So it's about 200 times, a little bit more than 200 times. And if you look at the area, Denmark has about 43,000 square kilometers and China about 9.6 million square kilometers. So it's also a little bit around 200 times. So if you look at the density, so Denmark is 129 person per square kilometers, and China about 139 person per square kilometers. So China then is slightly high, but it's not significantly high, I would say. But the difference is China's population is it's not uniform distributed. Most of the people are living on the coast and not in inland. So that's why you always feel if you go to China, oh, so many people, so crowded, on the train, in the shopping mall, on the street, but because it's unbalanced population density. And Denmark is a free country. We have the democracy here. But in China, we know that it's a one-party ruling, and the Chinese Communist Party is a dictatorship. So means we don't have election. We don't have like a vote or something like that. So these are some basic differences. And those things, of course, will impact people's way of thinking and livings. So now, generally speaking, I think Danes are very patient. For example, we can see people always waiting in the queue, for example, in the bus stop, and also, for example, when we in the supermarket when we wanted to pay the money. But the Chinese seem impatient. For example, very often you see people try to cut into the queues and try to find a way, find a shortcut, But one of the reasons I would say because of too many people. That could be one of the reasons, many people to explain it. But I think that, of course, there's a more deep reason behind it. I think things like hygge. So people always say, takk for sist, det var meget hyggeligt. But hygge, of course, hygge is very difficult to explain, to translate it directly in English. But I think not so many Chinese people truly understand what the hygge means. Things cannot be too pushed. Of course, what I've talked about today is only representing my own view, but my own perceptions may not be true. But we can also talk about it afterwards, So I think a thing cannot be too pushed. For example, if too pushed, then sometimes I think a thing will kind of break, But I think Chinese people have incredible capability to endure. Often I think Chinese people like little seeds, under the stone, and like a grass seeds. So if you give a little bit of sun, a little bit maybe, water, and then they will grow, no matter in the corner or in somewhere, maybe in the shadow or whatever. but they will grow. So this is often see that even though in many of the places the living condition may be very bad, or even the work environment is not ideal, and the pace of life is extremely high, and the workload is high, but they can survive and they can handle it. So this is I'm also very impressed that those capabilities that the Chinese people have. And also something in common. For example, in Denmark we have Jantelov, so it means that we should be modest. And in Chinese, Confucius said, Confucius is one of the most famous philosopher in around 500 BC. And he said that in a group of 3 people, there's always something I can learn from. So it means that we should be modest. So modest is one of the good virtue that Chinese people respect. So if you are arrogant, that's not so good in China. But of course, in US, maybe it's slightly different. US, American like I can do it. I'm the best, for example. This is maybe the Americans kind of mentality. But in Chinese, it's very similar. Like in Jantelov, you have to be modest. You say, well, I can always learn from someone else, and I should not be too bragged. And the hospitality, I think Danish people, if they really, although many people say, Danes are very cold because they're from Nordic countries. Italian are much warmer. But actually, I don't agree with that. I think Danes, yes, they are cold on the surface, but they're warm in the heart. I think if you really know the Danes very well, and they will invite you to home and to prepare very nice dinners, and they like to, for example, serve different wines for different courses, starter and main course, dessert, and with different wines. And I think they are very nice. They will treat you very well, if you become good friend with them. So they become like a true friend. It's not just only drinking. But the Chinese people same. Chinese people also like to, they will bring the best food they can afford, and to serve their guests. So this is also quite similar from my point of view. So regarding the public service or welfare, are Danes demanding? For example, we often see that on the TVs, newspapers, there always a lot of complaints about our bus and train, DSB train services. And for example, a lot of complaints about the long waiting time to see a doctor, and we have a lot of complaints about the services in the folk school, and pension systems, and how the care for the elderly people. Said not enough time or budget allocated for elderly people care, for example. A lot of the complaints. Are Chinese very easy with the public service? I often see that Chinese are very easy to get satisfied. Looks like very easy to get satisfied with the public service. For example, people will be very happy if there's idle seats on the bus, because if you see sometimes some people send me a YouTube link, see how people in Beijing they get on the bus. Because simply they're not to get on the bus, they're pushed into the bus and close the door. Because if no one push outside, they simply cannot close the door. And people are very happy if they get a train ticket with a seat. And people are very happy, for example, they can get a register to see a doctor. So very often you need to wait very long, and you need to get the different stamps to get to see the doctor. And then, it's also a big challenge, for example, if you wanted to enroll in a good school in China, especially, for example, Beijing. Because in China, people know that if they want the kids get successful in the future, in their career, when they grow up, then the education is very important. This the Chinese family know. But however, in China, if you want to get a really good education resources, it's not easy, because a good education resource is very limited. So that's why people always try to, for example, send the school to the good schools. However, then because too many students and too few good schools, so they have really restrictions. So who can enroll this school. So depending on the district where you live, and depending on your CPR numbers, and there's a lot of constraints. And then people fight with those resources. So that's why it's how are you able to enroll your kids at the right time to the right school? That is the first challenge that many of the families they are facing. And also in China, many people don't have a pension. And for example, when I talk about the DSP service, I always want to use this example that I had several years ago when I was in Copenhagen, and suddenly was a thunderstorm, and it was a storm, and the traffic lights were crashed, on the railway, and so lots of people waiting there. The train was cancelled. In the end, after 3 hours later, finally they fixed it. So we got on the train, and I was very happy that they fixed everything the same day, the same night. And then on the way back to Jylland, and then the conductor started to announce that we are deeply apologized for this incident. But the police remember, you can get your train ticket refund, because in DSB they have the kind of service promise. If you delayed 1 hour or something, you can get 25%. I don't know, but if you get more than 2 hours delayed, then you can get a full refund. I think this is incredible. I think this kind of service, if I don't give 5 stars, at least 4 stars, it's really good service. And even because it was very late, it's around 3 o'clock at night, and they said we already arranged the taxi or some buses in some places, for example, then they can carry you, to some other small villages, because all the public transportation already stopped. So everything already arranged. I was really impressed by the service. But you can compare that, because Danes take those public service as granted. They think that, yes, this should be at this standard. So they have really high expectations of the public services. But however, Chinese people, I think, if they cannot get those public services, they always think that it's their own problem. It's not the state problem. So that's why they have much lower expectations in terms of those public services. And if we talk about the faces means to Chinese, so what is faces? Faces in Chinese, we have a saying that wash your dirty linen at home, which means that means like keep up appearances. So it means you don't talk about the bad things of outside of families, outside the company, or outside of the different organizations. So this actually has a huge impact towards people's, like Chinese people's way of thinking and doing. It can reflect in every unit, as I mentioned, that in family, for example, family, they don't talk about bad things out of family, and also company, and even the state. Consequently, we can see that Chinese people very often are very reluctant to admit mistake. For example, if you have work with Chinese colleague, or maybe have some business partners, in case if he made a mistake, you have to do something, keep up his faces, his face, So of course, try to solve the problem in a more not so rapid way, but try to find a solution that without hurting his or her face. But of course, I think this might be also important in Denmark. But this is the consequences. Chinese people sometimes reluctant to admit mistakes, and they try to find excuses. Oh, maybe because this, that reasons. I don't like that way, but many people do this. But the worst thing is, that is from the state or maybe in the municipality level, that they always like to cover up the truth. For example, after catastrophe or after these contagious diseases, you cannot get a real figure of how many people died or what is the losses. They always cover it up. Maybe it was a number you get, maybe it's only lasted 2 digits, and the rest they will not tell. Simply, so it's difficult to find the truth in China. That is a really huge problem. So you cannot trust the media, because media is controlled. Of course, later on I will talk about the media freedom. But this is actually, you can see many forces about this. And also you can see in China has a lot of irrational face projects using taxpayers' money. For example, you want to build the highest buildings. You want to build the highest, longest bridge. You want to build the fastest train. All the city, they want to have the something number one. So this city, for example, sometimes I think it's a bit funny. One city built a longest bridge, and another city, okay, I want to build another one that's slightly longer than that bridge, because then we got the longest bridge in our province, But and also they build a lot of buildings. It's kind of spent a lot of money. It's become like a monument type of things. It's actually, I would say, it's a waste of money, many things. And also, for example, I've seen some pictures about those office buildings. Office building, they're at the level of county or maybe small county. The house, the building built and also interior design decoration made like a White House. If you tell them this is only a small county, public, office building, you cannot believe it. But they just spend those money because they want a good face, because they think this is kind of achievement to show that we made this. But actually, many of the money they loan, they borrow the money from the bank. Actually, it's a huge problem. Another thing is you often see, for example, China's manipulated economic numbers. And this is also a huge problem, because we always think that that is also later on, maybe this also relates a little bit of the Communist Party, that they always combined, because they want to combine the GDP growth with their own, the legitimacy of control control the country. So, but however, the GDP cannot always grow all the time. But now if the GDP growth, slow down, GDP growth slow down, so what they're gonna do? They're gonna manipulate all the numbers, but not only economic numbers, many other numbers. They always try to, for example, the Prussian index, for example, they also try to manipulate, because they don't want the people to know the truth, because they're afraid of cause chaos, or maybe cause unsatisfaction among people. So that's why many of the numbers you cannot trust simply. How much growth of the GDPs and all those is always make a question if it's true or not. There's many numbers is inflated in a way. Okay, so those are a few things related to the face. Now I wanted to talk about what it means, yes or no. By the way, if you have any question, you're always welcome to stop me anytime. So I will be happy to answer that. In Denmark, when we say no or yes, it's very explicit. If I say no, and then no, I mean it, yes or no. And also in Denmark, we say den der tier, samtykke. If you don't say, which means you agree. If you don't agree, you have to, you must say it. This is how it's kind of by default. If we don't say that, means we agree. Then that tier, samtykke. But in China, well, this is slightly different. Actually, it's very different. How to know a Chinese has an opposite opinion? It's very implicit, indirect. So Chinese people, for example, if Chinese people keep silent, let's say in a meeting, for example, you have Chinese colleagues, for example, let's say you do an international project, you're sitting in the round table and discuss the solutions, and let's say you're a project manager, you ask, do you have any different opinions? Silent. Then at this moment, if you assume that everybody agree with you, then you are very likely you are wrong. They don't talk does not mean they agree with you. So here I said it's a bit tricky. It does not mean yes if one does not say no. Normally Chinese people, if they don't say keep quiet, means they don't agree with you. But they will not say it directly, because if they say it directly, that will offend you. They keep quiet. But if they keep quiet, does not mean they will do as what you say. They may not do not exactly what what is agreed. You thought that is already agreed, but it's not. So if you want to really get opinion from a Chinese people, this is also, for example, here in Denmark, we can solve the problem in a group meeting, for example, with 8 people. We have group meeting, we solve everything. But Chinese sometimes are very implicit, means that if you want to get a true opinion of a Chinese, you need to talk with him or her individually. So you need to knock the door with, with his or her office and say, oh, can we have a chat? And then you talk. And then probably you can get the true opinion from your colleague. And because sometimes they're afraid to say openly, because they think if they say something, they might hurt the other people's with different opinions. So they don't want to. They're really very reluctant to talk openly. I think this is something, if you later on in the future you work with Chinese people, you have to keep in mind. But of course, I hope that more and more Chinese people are more and more getting open, and then hopefully in the future they are able to express them freely in the open in the group meetings. But actually, this is also, if you really look deep, it might also related, because I often think that why people behave that. It also could be related. Later I will talk about the freedom, speech freedoms and all this, because the big societal environment is kind of suppress the speeches. So that's why people are afraid, because in the old days, for example, during the Cultural Revolution, if you see something slightly wrong, then later on you will be criticized and you will be punished. Even you say maybe single words is wrong in the public. So that's why people intended to not say anything, because then you're afraid of making mistakes. So I think this has a kind of historical reasons behind it. So the relationship for business, I think in Denmark, of course, the relationship is of some importance. For example, if you get a recommendation from your friends and also previous boss, and then you can get maybe easy to get next job. If with some relationship, it's easy to do business. So networking is very important in Denmark. But in China, it's of paramount importance. Without network, you cannot do anything, simply. So many of the Westerners go to China. Probably the first word they learn, that is 关系. 关系 means the relationship. And of course, in China, the relationship they set up is based on, for example, family members or relatives, or friends, or classmates. But I don't know actually in Denmark how much the relationship about the classmates works for business relationship. Does it count? Like your old classmates?
Let's ask.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if, for example, if you say, because this is what we discussed the last time, was in our engineering meeting, we will talk about the alumni and all this. For example, you have alumni, that means you graduate from the same university. Do you think that those kind of bond is important?
Coming from a specific university, having network, and you can ask me, what do you think? Yeah.
I think it has some importance. For example, if I were a manager and I needed to hire an engineer, then I knew what a person who came from Aarhus University could do, in contrast to someone from Aalborg, because I haven't gone to Aalborg University, so I don't know that. So I will probably be more likely to pick someone
from
with qualifications I know.
Yeah. Okay.
But
I think what you're talking about is more the brand value. Is that what you're talking about?
It's not the brand. It's not the brand value.
Coming from Harvard than from Aarhus University.
No, it's what it means. For example, if you came from same university, that means, for example, you go. For example, when you do business, and you say, "Oh, you're also from Aarhus. I'm also from Aarhus."
Yeah.
Then you feel like you wanted to more likely to do the business together if you know you already have something in common, But this is also very much in China. For example, if you're from the same universities, then they will look at those things. Yeah.
I have a fun example of that. Me and Niels and some other guys from the mechanical engineers, we visited Shanghai a couple of years ago, And we visited a big firm over there called XBMC, who makes cranes for containers. And their biggest customer was Maersk. And they knew that the CEO of Maersk had went to Aarhus University. So we were greeted like a part of Maersk, because they knew we were a part of Aarhus University. So they rolled out the red carpet, and we went to the boardroom and we got gifts and all of that. So, and we were greeted by the CEO of this billion-dollar company. Totally crazy.
So you become the VIP.
And that wouldn't happen in Denmark, I can assure you.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is also because before we would talk about how we can maybe, you know, to maybe set up the relationship with old, you know, graduate alumni. But because we have faculty members discuss about this, but they said it's not that much in Denmark. Maybe have some importance, but it's not that, you know, kind of paramount importance. Okay. And then when you want to take a break?
I don't know. I think you should ask the students. What do you think? Is
But
it
I think
close to a break or?
because now I think it's okay. But maybe after a while, maybe we can take a break.
Okay.
And then we talk about trust among people. In Denmark, I think people are trustworthy. And actually, there's a research that has been done in the Oxford Business School that Denmark is Danes are the champion regard in terms of trust among people. So, for example, I often see, for example, we can see unwatched, you know, carnival in the corridor, in the apartment, or outside of shops. People just leave the carnival pram outside, and you know, doing something else. You're not afraid of your baby will be stolen or something like that. Or even in some small villages, you can even see, you know, people put the strawberries or maybe homemade honey or something, and then put some you know, coins you can buy by yourself. I like it actually, but this will not work in China. So I think actually in old days, Chinese people also like this. It's very, you know, because the credibility and honest, this is very good virtue, are respected, are cherished in the society. But nowadays, if you know, this kind of credibility or honest, people think, you're a fool if you do like this, because it's very dangerous. If people are, you know, a lot of baby traffickings, a lot of baby are stolen, for example. So generally speaking, that in nowadays, unfortunately, in China, that the lacks of trust among people, and there's many reasons behind it. I think those kind of trust actually destroyed gradually after 1949, because after 1949, 1949 is a year that the Communist Party took the power. And there's lots of movements, and especially one of the movements is the Cultural Revolution. But during the Cultural Revolution, for example, as I already mentioned the slide before, if you see something, for example, if you're feeling that, oh, maybe now the policy is not so good. If you see even at the home, and the next day your spouse or your daughter or your son then will go to the, you know, the unit, the party unit, to report you. Oh, my mother said what? And my father said something bad about the party. So all the trust, even among the family, has been destroyed. So people are really keep, you know, kind of quiet, and all the trust. Also, for example, now a lot of people also know, for example, all the medias, a lot of manipulated news and manipulated, you know, figures. So they don't trust the media, and they don't trust the government. So all the trust is not there. But in Denmark, for example, we pay a lot of tax, but we trust that our authority will take care of the money well, to allocate the money well. But those is a kind of system already built. So those kind of trust not in every unit, you know, among the people, among the organizations, among the individual to the state, that those trust is already built very well. Actually, those trust is kind of like a soft power. This is an indication of soft power. That, for example, imagine many things, because of trust, many procedure can simplify. For example, you don't need to write a lot of document to say, oh, I have did this, you know, you need to check everything. Once I'll give an example, I said once I was, the first time I doing my car service, I drove my car and then I said I park there and they said, okay, you can come in to pick up at before 5 o'clock today. So I leave the car key. And then he said he did not do it, said you can come back before 5 o'clock. I was wondering, do I need to get some paper or something like that? But it seems it's not needed. You know, I don't need this in Denmark because I can simply, of course, coming back to pick up my keys. The car will be there. But of course, I think you should not do this. Of course, you need to get a little bit of receipt or something in China to indicate that I did leave my car this morning to you. I cannot simply just give my car key and without anything and leave, right? But this is a simple example, which means that because of trust, this is soft power, means we can simplify a lot of administrative work. You don't need to write the receipt, you don't need to give the receipt. Many things is simplified because of trust. Word is word. But if many of the countries, if lack of trust, then they have to use a lot of administrative work to ensure everything goes fine. You know, I have once had a friend of mine. He traveled to China and he was in the hotel. He wanted to borrow, I think, a Wi-Fi, you know, dongle, something like that. And then people ask him, oh, you need to show the passport. If you want to borrow this, you have to show your passport. You have to fill in the tables. A lot of procedures just to borrow some small things in the hotel, you know, front, you know, reception. I mean, come on, I mean, it's a small thing. Imagine he will stay here for 1 week and he's a businessman, but because they're used to do these kind of things, and if they think this is must procedure you have to go through. It sounds a bit kind of a stupid way to do it, but maybe for them that's important. So I think this actually the consequence is huge, you know, without the trust, and also I think the state and all the other, for example, media, they still try to behave the way of they doing things or handle things. They still cannot show enough credibility. So that's why, you know, people are intended not to trust everything. So I think this is also have another bad consequences. Even though, for example, you are telling the truth to people, and people intended, they would rather not to believe because they are afraid to be cheated. So they simply like, in a way that I think it's how to say that, because in China it's difficult to find the truth, but on the other hand, also people are reluctant to take the truth if you tell people the truth, because they cannot distinguish what is truth and what is not. You know, so it's kind of psychologically they try to refuse many things. Another thing I want to talk about is the attitudes towards environment and nature. In Denmark, I think here we are very environment friendly. For example, we talk a lot using a lot of green energies, and we know how to, for example, utilize the trash. For example, we have the affaldsvarme. So it's a very good way to recycle the trash. So all the things is utilized. So this, of course, is built into the system, and everything is so green and environment friendly. Nowadays in China, I think because, for example, the Communist Party, they advocate that nature remodeling, and they also talk about the struggle with heaven and the struggle with earth and the struggle with men. So they always talk about you need to make a change. And another thing is, for example, very much all the policies, many decision making is only considered solely on the GDP growth. And so they always prioritize that the GDP growth instead of the environment protection. And then Chinese people, they have to pay a huge consequences. For example, in the 1950s, they changed the grassland in interior Mongolia, because those is normally is a grassland, but then they want to have nature remodeling. They change the grassland into the farmland, and of course in the first few years it's nice that they have with the farmland, and they have harvest the crops. But then after a few years, and those because those farmland cannot reserve the water, and then after a few years, those grassland turn into desert, so become desertized. So now in the spring in China, in Beijing, always have sandstorm. Where the sandstorm comes from, that is from interior Mongolia, because many of the area grassland has become desert. So this is a simple example. Regarding, for example, the GDP, that I think this I can use a lot of example to talk about, because, for example, many of the villages, and if they wanted to, for example, so those very toxic chemicals, and because if they think that's important to set up those kind of plant, and even without any, for example, wastewater post-processing, and they just directly, emit it to the rivers and lakes, and then all the groundwater are polluted, for example, with the heavy metals and also other toxic chemicals. And another thing is probably that I mentioned last time. In last year, there was a very famous documentary made by the former CCTV reporter Chai Jing, and she used her own money to fund this documentary production. This was uploaded on the 28th of February, and then 2 days later, because that was a weekend, and 2 days later on Monday, that was the 2nd of March, 175 million people watched over the weekend of that documentary. That is the Under the Dome. I have the link up in the slides. Under the Dome. That is explain the where, why, and how, and the poison, the smoke came from. And actually, one of the reasons, because you have heard about, probably I should have some slides. Here I have some slides you can see. So this is a sandstone. You can see this is sandstone, okay? And then you have the poison, the smoke. So people wear masks. So this is one of the marathon competition that the people are wearing masks. So the poisonous smog actually is a PM 2.5. But the question is where the PM 2.5, so severe in China because of, and she made investigation and she found that there are several reasons. One of the reasons is many of the diesel trucks, they don't have the emission control equipment filter in the car, in the truck. But however, those trucks always a green tag on the window show that they are certified by the state authority. But however, they don't have. So means because the whole production chain and also control chain are corrupted. And the Caijing was trying to contact one of the car manufacturers, said, why you don't install this emission control filter in the truck that you produced? He said, well, if all the car manufacturers install this, of course I'm willing to do that. But however, if nobody do it, if I am the only person install it, then I will pay 20,000 Chinese yuan more on my car. Then how can I sell my car? But the question is where they get the tag. The tag is given by the authority. So because of corruption, And another reason is Caijing found out that all the gatherings, petrols, and the diesels, the quality is far behind the international standard. So then she went to the environmental department to ask the officers, why in China the standard is so low And then the officer said, well, I cannot do anything because I'm not the person to define the standard, because this standard is, of course, also behind the EU standard as well. And then Caijing asked, who defined the standard? Do you know who defined the standard? That is the state-owned oil companies. They define the standard. So the state-owned oil company, they are the player, but they are also the judge. They are the game, how they define the person who defines the game. And Caijing asked the director of the state-owned company, said, how can you define the standard of the oil quality? He said, well, we are the expert. That's why we can define it. So imagine so many cars are running on the road and they're using the petrols that are not qualified. Then of course, so many emissions with PM 2.5. So actually, if you look at according to the statistics, over the past 30 years, the number of lung cancer in China increased more than 400%. And also in China, there are a lot of small villages that has a huge number of people who have got cancers, and they have according to the number, they have about 247 or something, more than 200 called cancer village because of pollutions. That maybe majority of the people in the village all got the cancer. And for example, if you look at the underground water, I think more than 70% of underground water has been polluted. It's very dangerous, actually. Of course, the economy is growing and the GDP is growing, but the consequence is let's say, unmeasurable in a way that how much it will pay the Chinese people. Our children's children are going to pay for the consequences. But actually, if you look at ancient China, of course, China has a Chinese philosophy is mainly based on the Taoist thoughts. Taoist, I don't know if you know about Taoist thoughts. Taoist thoughts is about centers on the harmony among the heaven and earth and the man, harmony among the man and the nature. That is the root, let's say, the Taoist thought. And so we always talk about how should we live, harmonized with the nature. And for example, Taoists always talk about naturalism and spontaneity. And they always talk about how can we, leverage the natural forces and the principles and to get the things done and to get the things, done in a smooth way, not account the natural forces and the principles. But this, of course, is very different than the way of people are doing now. But of course, if we really dig deep about what happened, but this is related after 1949, the Chinese communist regime is systematically destroying the Chinese traditional values and the belief systems that those deeply believe the system like Taoism and Buddhism and Confucianism that are being suppressed and criticized. I mean, if they are able to maintain those traditional values and the cultures, then I think this kind of things, for example, pollutions, and will never occur. Actually, I think maybe it's a good time to take a break. Okay. Yeah, maybe take a short break. Resume the lecture. So here we talk about the sandstorm and the smogs. Now we can also look at the polluted rivers. So this is a river and a lake. So those are the pictures next to those fish are died. But of course, China still have many, clean waters, but a lot of clean water has been polluted. So now if we talk about the concept of individuality and individualism, in Denmark, I think the society, generally speaking, respect the need of each individual. And I remember one of the Danish lady told me, the Danish kids, since you go to the dagpleje, you start to have your own opinion. I wanted the menu 1, I wanted the menu 2. you start to give your own opinion. You have this choice because you have individual need. And of course, in many other aspects, for example, we can see what, for example, different people. Also, you can see from the welfare system. You know, they are really very considerate. The welfare system. They think about all the need of each individuals. They try to satisfy or meet the individual need. But in China, that the society, it does not advocate individuality, and mainly focus on the collective. For example, here in Denmark, people can read whatever you like to read, so you are easily to access a lot of information. But in China, no free access of information, so means that many of the books and internet are censored. For example, you are only allowed to see what they allow you to see and read. So you probably also know we have this great firewall that you cannot to visit many of the Western websites and the bloggers, for example, they are all blocked. Even in China, people cannot use Wikipedia and Facebook, for example. And here, people are allowed to think independently and freely. And you are of course, why this you mentioned here? Of course, everybody should think freely and independently. But this is not the case in China. Actually, if you think independently, that is not so good. Actually, it's not encouraged at least. Because if you think independently, then you might think, oh, then it's difficult to control, because as a dictatorship system, they want people they can able to control all the individuals. But if everybody think individually, then they will have problem. They only want the people that take the command and do it. And here people can believe. So we have this belief freedom here in Denmark. We have like belief freedom and religious freedom, and ytringsfrihed, all these freedoms. And for example, it's ytringsfrihed, right? But in China, there's no belief freedom. People, for example, basically that they in communist country, the communist, the Marxism, and those are they wanted believe absolutism. So you're only allowed to believe that, and the rest they think that is not so good. For example, you believe. Other believe, for example, Buddhisms, and even though on the surface now, even though they have a lot of Buddhist temples, but still, if you want to truly believe, if you truly want to talk about the divine, the God, and that is not really allowed actually. For example, a lot of if you look at nowadays a lot of like a Christian church were destroyed actually, and also kind of persecuted, and also other, for example, Tibetans was quite much persecuted, suppressed in China as well. And also, for example, you might have heard about one of the Chinese meditation Falun Dafa practitioner is also being persecuted, and millions of people were detained and tortured. So this I can talk a lot about that, but if you're interested, you can look up in the internet to see how much they controlled, because those belief can make people think freely, to think independently. But this is the system does not allow that. And no speech freedom, that is a really big issue. So in China, all the media are state-owned. If you ask how many free publishers in China, do you know how many free publishers in China? 0. So this is really a problem, that there's no speech freedom. So all the, for example, like TVs, radios and newspapers, that all the what kind of article you are write is very much controlled by the propaganda department or cultural department. Because if you write something that's not aligned with the voice of the state, then those articles, of course, cannot be published. And actually recently, you probably know in China we have every Chinese New Year's Chinese New Year's Eve. So we call it Spring Festival. There's a CCTV. CCTV means China Central Television. It's like a national state TV station. They have the CCTV Spring Festival Gala. And every year, actually, this is a tradition since 1980. So every year people celebrate. So it has a lot of entertaining programs, singing, dancing, you know, and the talk shows, a lot of comedies, you know, it's kind of mixed with a gala. From 80s, it was just pure entertainment. But now, because it become a tradition, so the state think, well, this is a good platform to doing some propagandas, you know, because so many audience, you have about nearly maybe around 1 billion or maybe 800 million people will watch that night, because after dinner you don't have any other things, then you watch the gala through the TV broadcast. But now this year the gala got so much criticized this year because this gala become pure political, become a pure propaganda for the party. So that's why, and there's a lot of ironical sayings on the some blog, the social media. They said, well, you know, the technology of to produce a missile in North Korea is nearly catch up the technology in China, and so in China, the quality of artistic quality of the those gala is nearly catch up the artistic level in North Korea. So you can see that how bad now is, how getting worse and worse for these kind of things. And also, actually, recently I was reading the news. I think it's 2 weeks ago, probably in February. And the President Xi, the current president, he visited some of the state-owned media outlets. And then the TV, the CCTV, they actually, even hold, kind of set up a banner written that the media's surname is party, and we are absolutely royal, and please inspect us in the banner. So that is really, I think it's pretty kind of well, because maybe this happened, for example, in the 70s. Then I said, oh, maybe like the old days, But now it's 2016. If write this kind of banners, like media's surname is party, I think that is too obvious. Like, even though everybody knows this media is controlled by the party, but you say this openly, that is way too much, I think. What do you think? It's a really little bit ridiculous, right? And actually, people, or even see some commentators say that normally journalists, like reporters, it's a very respectful job, career. But now, if in the international world, if, for example, some reporters go to US, if they say that what do you do? If you say, oh, I'm the reporter in CCTV, then people feel very ashamed to say this, because because this is not a decent job, because you are just be controlled, write what the state want you to write about it. So this becomes a not very respectable job in a way. So I think it's a pretty shame, for many of very talented reporters and journalists. I mean, because if they want to work there and they have to do what they asked to do. It's pretty shame. And also here, I think people in the games are very creative. But it's creative because people are able to think independently. So that's why they can be creative. But I think because of those constraints, you are not able to do this, you are not able to do that, you are not allowed to think freely, then I think people became, actually Chinese people are very creative. But because of all those frames that make people less creative or cannot be creative. For example, one of the famous film director, Feng Xiaogang, he said that because in China, all the film if you need to publish, the film, you need to go through, all the film need to go through more than 30 different organizations. to censor if everything is okay, all the content is 30 organizations. And he said, if in China, if those kind of systems still exist, forget about the Oscar award, forget about it. And he said, as a director, he said, sometimes I find some inspirations and made some very good a script for the film, and suddenly after you produce everything, then this part cut and that part cut. In the end, it's not really what it originally looked like. So it's a really pity and to encourage people to be creative, because all the creativity kind of died because of the whole system. Okay, another thing about, for example, if I want to elaborate about the no free access of information, we can see that, for example, I mentioned the Great Wall, but in China we have about 2 million internet police. This is according to the statistic in 2013. And the Amnesty International, they have reported that China has the largest recorded number of imprisoned journalists and cyber dissidents in the world. For example, according to the 2013 or 2012, I cannot remember, according to the Amnesty International annual report, that in China they spend 112 billion US dollars, this amount of money, to use for example, suppress their own people, for example, like house arrest, dissident, or persecute, for example, different political dissident. And this number actually is higher than military expense. That is way too much, because they spend more money to suppress their own people than to build the military service. Well, so that's why people, because you might wondering why they spend so much huge money, for the internet censorship. Why? The thing is, normally we know that the technology, the advances in the technology of the internet, the purpose is to share the information, because with the internet it's much easier for us to share the information, to communicate with each other. But however, that is something that in a dictatorship country, that this is something not how to say, wanted in a way, So, but the thing is, as I see, even though a lot of, kind of internet police and the great firewalls, but the technology is getting more and more difficult to stop the technology, to forbid people to communicate and to share the information. For example, I know that more and more people have become bloggers, and they use the social media to spread information. As far as I know, for example, when people see something, because now we have the mobile phones, smartphones, if people see something, bad or wrong, and people immediately took pictures and then, streaming, shoot some video, then they upload it through social medias. And then maybe these pictures will be deleted after 1 hour or maybe half a day. But before it deleted, millions of people have seen it. And even maybe people, make a copy on their local disk, or maybe already send it to the server in the overseas. So those pictures and the video actually remains. So still, that even though they are trying to block everything, but I think the technology are really bring the communication and helping people spread the information. And also, if we talk about how the decision is executed, in Denmark, I think we encourage debates. No matter small thing or big things, you can always hear a lot of debates in the DR2 and in the radios. And I always want to use one of the example, that is the Betalings thing, that is previous the government. They actually Betalings in Copenhagen. I don't know if you still remember. Actually, they written this into the Hungarian law, and then because of people in Copenhagen, they did not like it. So the state said, okay, then let's cancel it. Because the state thinks that they are elected by the people, so people's opinion should decide what the state should do. And so that's why the citizens here in Denmark are very trained to express their own point of view. And when I was studying some of the Danish cultures, Danish society, Danish political system, and actually one thing it's interesting, catch my eye is that about the Danish education system. It mentioned that in the focus group that the kids, it's not only to learn the knowledge, but they should be trained to think independently, because to get prepared as a qualified citizen for democratic country, because you need to vote when you grow up. So you need to get trained about how to distinguish things and how to have your own opinions. So you know how to that you need to challenge the authority, for example. But I think this is a very different case in China, because in China is a very hierarchy basically, and it's kind of we have a big power distance. So everything is like top down, and so people, as I said, people are trained to follow the command, to do the things. But of course, if you want to challenge the authority, then sorry, this is not allowed, will be strongly suppressed. But I also can see this could be slightly changing, because now very often, for example, there's also a few cases and people try to challenge the authority and they get succeeded in the end. For example, some of the maybe like for example some of the big cities, they wanted to build a chemical plant, and then because a lot of people are aware that those chemical plants will really harm their health, the people surrounded. So they're doing small demonstrations and they give pressure to the state, and in the end, the decision maker in the municipality, they cancel the plan to build those chemical plants. So those are also good few cases that means that people's opinion, if you have enough people that do not agree, and then it might change the situation. But of course, you also probably have know about the Three Gorge Dam. Three Gorge Dam is actually before it was built, a lot of scientists against it because this will harm the ecosystem around the dam. But at that time, because of the top down, because there's no debate, because this is a political decision from the high level of the government. So that's why, of course, those opinions from the scientists will not be considered. So they still built this Three Gorge Dam and spend a huge amount of money. But the consequence is now that after built the Three Gorge Dam, they destroy the ecosystem. And then, for example, very often in the summertime, some of the province get flooding, and the nearby, neighbor province get a drought. So you can see that, and then millions of people need to vacate from that area. They need to leave the homeland they have lived for many generations. Then they have to move to other places, and this also has a lot of problems after those people need to, because they need to immigrate to some other province, and how to find a house, how to settle down those people become huge societal problems. So this is as one of the simple example. You can see that the project without or decisions without debate, you always have some consequences, because maybe if not fully debated, then all the aspects you haven't really considered through. But here, if you encourage debate, then of course that it may be somehow less efficient, because it takes a long time to debate and then get a decision. Of course, sometimes it's not so efficient, but on the other hand, it reduces the risk of a mistake. But if without, for example, in China, if without the debate, then it's easily to have a mistake. Of course, the advantage, some people say, yeah, advantage is very efficient if a decision is made, and then you just do it. There's no debate, so they shorten the time, to execute, to launch the project. But I think if we look overall, I think with some debate is still good, because otherwise, if, for example, like Three Gorge Dam, such a project, I think the consequences is not, I don't know how much years it will recover the you know, the environment. And also we talk about the transparency in the government and the organization. In Denmark, I think it's very transparent. Everybody knows that. And I think here the public officials are honest, and they, you know, if you talk about the corruption, that is very, very rare. Of course, I heard a few cases in Denmark, but it's very small and very, very rare. And the nepotism is also rare. But in China, because the whole government system and all different organizations, they lack of transparency. So that's why corruptions and bribery is unavoidable, basically, because it's a one-party system. You cannot, you know, avoid corruptions. Although nowadays, since Xi Jinping, you know, start from 2012 or something like that. I cannot remember now. So they have the anti-corruption campaign now since I think 2012, 2013. So huge number of high-rank officers are now into the prison because they have corrupted a lot of money. But this is just tip of the iceberg, because they cannot, because everybody in the system, in the political system, they more or less always corrupt a little bit, you know. So you cannot put everybody in the prison. So it's not avoidable, basically, because as actually one of the leader in China, he said, it's like, you know, it's like a surgery. It's like a surgeon. You cannot do surgery for yourself. As a one-party system, you cannot do surgery for yourself. And that's true, because here, for example, if blue party in the blue bloc do something wrong, and then the red bloc will criticize. So they have a kind of system to balance it. But if one party, there's no such system to balance and to monitor or to inspect each other. And also in China, the nepotism is prevalent. As also mentioned, the guanxi, if you through a lot of guanxi through families and the relatives, then of course you will have this nepotism. And because of the nepotisms and because of transparency, because of corruptions, and actually in China, the economic polarization is extremely severe. So China has very high Gini index. Gini index actually is an index to show the equality in the society. For example, Denmark is a country has a very low Gini index, means Denmark is a quite equal country. Equality is good. But China, I think, since 2007, or is that they stopped to publish the Gini index, or maybe the number also may not be true, you know, the Gini index. So you can see, so these are from the suburb of Beijing, and this is also from Beijing. So this is a suburb of Beijing, and this is also from Beijing. So you can see the huge contrast because of economic polarizations. So some people, the poor people are getting poor, and the rich people, they are able to accumulate a huge number of the capitals and doing business. Because if they have the guanxi, if they have the relationship in the party or in the government, then for them it's very easy to do the business. Because they have a huge market, you know, it's a huge country. So I think this is not for adventure. The kids, it actually feels like the kids go to school every daily. So this is a daily life for some of the kids this is from the southwest of China. So those are the kids, they go to school every day. So you can see the condition is not so, actually it's horrible, I think, the condition. And because of the economic polarizations, and I think now one of the bigger problems in China is materialism. In Denmark, I think people are rather low profile, even though maybe some people, for example, like some of the design stuff, but it's not so keen to very luxury goods. This is my perception. I don't know if it's true, but at least because people are not so chasing for huge brand, for example, Prada or Louis Vuittons. Not that much. Maybe you buy one bag or two, but that's it. Because you just like it. It's not because you want to show off, right? But in China, I think many people are pursuing the luxury goods to show off to show their identity. So you maybe probably often hear that when the Chinese tourist becomes the biggest buyer of those luxury goods in the world, that for example they, came to Europe to have vacation or tours, the first thing they want to do instead of go, of course, after seeing the Eiffel Tower, and then the next thing they want to go to Lafayette to shopping, and they have because I think because of values, and it's not so much values in China now. So what you can show you different from others, how you distinguish yourself from others, then is you want to use Louis Vuitton bag or Rolex watch to show your identity that you are different from others. So, but this is a huge impact on the moral basis and the value of the young people and young generation, because they don't know what are the values. And they look at those people, they thought that is a way to go. So this is one of my biggest concern about our young generation. And also, for example, people are getting, because Danish people are very low profile, and Danish people are very happy. Maybe do not have so much high luxury goods, but the Danish people are very happy and are quite satisfied with the income and the living conditions we have now. But the Chinese people, I think, somehow I felt that they're getting more and more unhappy and unsatisfied in terms of those material things, because they always look at, my neighbor has a better car, much better car. My neighbor have this kind of bag and I don't have. So they always like to compare with all these things. I don't know why they do that, but because here we will more or less have a similar income, no matter how much income you have, but after tax more or less the same. We are satisfied. So we don't talk about, like, oh, what the kind of bag you take, paper bag. So we don't never discuss about those things, in our job with colleagues or with other friends. But in China, people always talk about, they always look at which kind of bag, which brand you use, or which kind of new car you are driving. So they're very keen on those things. I think that actually it's not good for our young generation. So after I've been here more than 10 years, and I think I have understood this sentence from the Martin Luther more and more. He said that the prosperity of a country depends not on the abundance of its revenues, nor on the strength of its fortification, nor on the beauty of its public buildings, but it consists in the number of its cultivated citizens, in its men of education, enlightenment, and character. Here are to be found its true interests, its chief strength, its real power. That is a real power. That is a soft power.
You know who he is? Martin Luther?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know him?
Yes.
Oh, Protestant.
It's
yes.
a priest there.
Yes.
So this is, I often feel that as a Danes, Denmark does not have a huge land, does not have so much natural resources, but you should be proud of yourself that you have the real power, the soft power, the cultivated citizens. And I hope that in China, the Chinese people, actually China has a magnificent, cultures, and we have a lot of wisdoms, Asian wisdom, how to live, according to the natural principles, and we have very high morals in the old days actually, and it's like Denmark. But however, those things are lost, it's lost, and I hope one day we can restore those, moral values and the value systems, and that only by doing that, then the China will have a hope. And of course, this will do a lot of good things and benefit the entire world as well, because China has a huge economy. And if we are able to uplift the moral standard of Chinese people, I think this is a hope for the entire world. Okay, I have a few other things. For example, you might ask, what are the genuine traditional Chinese culture? The other one is the Confucianism. So Confucianism, they talk about the 5 cardinal values. For example, we say the 仁义礼智信, that is benevolence, justice, propriety, wisdom, and integrity. And very much these are those values are cherished and celebrated in the ancient times. And also those values like loyalty and honesty and modesty and so on. And if you wanted to know more about China, there's a few links. I haven't checked if all those links are still valid. For example, this is very good documentary. I have shown a few minutes in the beginning. That is the China Strife and Turmoil. Was made by the British historian Ferguson. And then there's also a award-winning film documentary, Free China's A Courage to Believe, made by Michael Permer and NTD TV. And this is one of the documentary I have seen last year, that is from DR. And this is the documentary about the environment under the dome, and you can see here. It's very interesting actually. There's two articles that is written by one of the associate professor in Roskilde University, Wu Lepeng. He has been in China for more than 20 years. He is doing research about China, about the societal problems and many things. So he wrote two articles many years back, and I think it's very good because he knows China very well. What he has written I can see has a deep insight about China. So what he wrote is, because in Danish it's so easy for you to read, hvad vi ikke vil se i Kina, dansk illusioner i Kina. So if you are interested, you are very welcome to read those articles. Okay, so thank you very much for your time, and I'm very happy to give this presentation. And I also thank Yenna giving me this opportunity and to meet you all.
I think we have some questions before.
Yes.
Do you think it's realistic to imagine China as such a strong economic country if it was based on democracy, that they could catch this succeed?
Yes. This is often many people concerned. People think that, well, China has a huge country, so that's why democracy does not suitable for China. This is many people's assumption, but I don't think that is a valid assumption.
If I give you an example, if you imagine China as a big organization or company, and we have something Rosiane about management, that it's so typical that when you become a huge organization and company, then you have this top-down system. And this is the typical way to grow. But if you are a smaller organization like Denmark, then it's easier to have more cooperation between the levels.
Yeah.
So I disagree with you that it could be possible to have such a big population and be open to make so many debates and all these things, which is good in somehow if you are a smaller organization, but I don't think it's realistic to imagine you.
Yeah, but of course you can have different levels, So for example, you can have a debate, for example in the municipality level. You can, if you want to build something, because in the municipality they have a lot of power to decide things, like build things. So at least they can start with the municipality level to start with the debate, for example. And you can also in the county level, for example. And many of the big, at least for example, many of the big state-owned project, if they want to launch, for example, Three Gorge Dam, at least they need to let the scientists to have a debate. It's not everybody joins the debate, right? So it's not everybody debate, but at least experts from different perspectives, they could debate with each other.
So I would like to ask you another thing. We talked about in the break, during the break, about the tipping point.
Yeah.
How long time do you think that people can breathe, can live, can see, all this pollution we talked about?
Yeah.
Don't you think that it will change? We talked about 10 years or 5 years. Something will happen. People think now enough is enough. Or what do you see?
it's of course I'm not expert to make this kind of a precise prediction. So when this will change, but it might take time. But I think changing is a kind of is a must. You know, this is kind of unavoidable in a way, because I know that because now China is under a dramatic change. It's a very a lot of there's a lot, you can see a lot of instability, you know, kind of symptoms. And so of course the state tried to show a stable kind of phenomena to the entire world. For example, they tried to have a good stable economy. For example, they wanted to have a stable stock market. But however, the reality is not, it's not always as they wish for. For example, the stock market last year has a kind of dramatic change, had dropped a lot of the stock market, and even though the state had a lot of intervene about how try to maintain the stock market level, but still this is artificial intervene. It's not by the natural law or natural kind of market economy kind of games. But regarding this, you see the tipping point. I think this is a very complicated system in a way, you know. And when this will come, I cannot make kind of a prediction. But I think, as I see, also in China, it's also changing. Why? Because I think the top leaders, they maybe also have a vision, and they know they are well-educated people, you know. Many things they say, the forbidden this, forbidden that in China, actually they know that is good. They know very well, because they know that is good, that's why they forbid this and that. Because only thing purpose is they know that they cannot last forever. They know very clearly, you know. But the only thing is they wanted to be in the power as longer as they can. So this is only wish they have. So all the policies they are doing, for example, they try to enlarge the middle class, try to increase the economy, you know, increase the income, then hope people can keep quiet, be happy, you know. So this is also that their strategy or tactic, you know, that they are doing, you know. But only thing is they try to avoid the the sudden change, you know. But I think with more and more educated people, for example, now young generation more and more educated, and they know how to use the social media. Because imagine in the old days, you know, teenager, of course they don't know how to use, you know, social media. But now people like to use the social medias, and many of the information are spread, although they will be deleted very soon. But I think all those, you know, kind of conditions are helping to wake up people, to open people's eyes, to let people to think about it, to let people to reflect at what they see and then what they think, you know. So I think everything is gradually is changing, is moving towards. I'm quite actually positive, even though many people say, yeah, as I show some of the media control is even getting tightened. But why it's getting tightened? Because party feeling they are losing the control, so that's why they need to tighten it. You know, like screw, you need to screw a little bit more to get it tight. So, but it means that from the, you know, general public, that more and more people are waking up, you know. And also I think with the communication, exchange, many of the, you know, Chinese people, engineers, or maybe they coming to Europe and they see the things, they hear the things, and then they bring back and they think about it, you know, even though they may not immediately change, you know, because they very much, with such kind of education, it takes time for them to change their view. But with more exchange, with more communication with you guys, and then they will learn what is good and what is bad, and they were able to tell, you know. But it takes some time, you know. For me, it's also, you know, when I came to Denmark, maybe I remember after 3 months, I was in a birthday party. One of the Dane asked me, oh, he said, oh, China don't have democracy. And I was very offended. I tried to say the same thing as you said. I said, well, you know, China has a huge population. Democracy does not suitable for China. I did the same thing. I said the same thing. It's true. But because that is my worldview at that time, because this is how we taught it in our class, in our textbook. Our textbook said, oh, because democracy is not suitable for China. China has a huge population. This become, because at that time I'm not able to think freely, think independently, because I just said what I've taught in the school. But of course, after I have been living this for so many years, I have changed my view, and because I have to understand the Danish system much more, and I'm able to think independently now. So that's why now I will never say that.
Yeah, but if you now when you say this, it made me to say, how about all these countries that in Arabic Spring that we were thinking that it's possible to inject democracy in somehow, but you see the result, it doesn't work. So I believe that you should maybe think more about if it is realistic.
It takes time. It takes time. But actually, you know, in China, the first election is from 1912. Do you know that? That is more than 100 years ago. China had the first election, and this elected the government until 1949. So before 1949, so between 1912 and 1949, China had one government that is elected. Although at that time the election is not fully compliant with the nowadays, you know, everybody joins elections, but it is elected. It has followed the American system. So they have, for example, representative of Senate and the House of Representatives. You know, they have the system and they elected. You know, so if you say election, that's not suitable. But I can telling you, the first election is 100 years ago, and at that time there's a free publisher. People are able to have a free publisher media. People are able to say something. People can doing the demonstrations much more freely. But that condition, because although during that time is a question about freedom, is about how, because during this from 1912 to 1949, it's a question about how much you have. Like you have some, because some period is a little bit more tight, sometimes more loose. So it's a question of how much you have during this period. But now in China basically there's no freedom at all. So there's a huge difference, you know, because this may not be complete freedom, but you have some, at least you have some, for example, speech freedom and media freedom at that time. So this is a complete different story. Yes, any more questions?
No, I think not.
Okay.
I would like to thank you. Should we give Chi a hand? I know what you are used to get
thank you.
for the next 6 months.
Okay, thank you.